The United Nations says its goal of zero hunger by 2030 seems unlikely. It's issued a report that says 582 million people will be undernourished by the end of the decade. More than 9% of people worldwide went hungry in 2023. That's compared to 7.5% 5 years ago. Hunger has been on the rise in African countries for nearly a decade. Last year, 139 million people were affected. But more than half of all those without enough to eat were in Asian nations. Nearly 30% of the world's population did not have regular access to adequate food last year. More than a third of the global population couldn't afford to eat a healthy diet in 2022. We have with us Alexandra Rutishauser-Perera, who's the head of nutrition with Action Against Hunger UK, joining us live from Spain. Welcome to the Al Jazeera Newshour. Thanks for your time. Why do you think that the global prevalence of hunger is persisting at the same level for the past 3 consecutive years?
Hi, and thanks for welcoming me. But the main reason why it's persistent, it's because we are not really addressing the main structural causes of malnutrition. We are at times addressing symptoms, and even for that, the financing is not sufficient. But when we talk about the consequences of conflicts, the consequences of climate shocks, the consequences of increasing inequalities, especially economic, without talking about gender equalities, as well as the fact that the cost of healthy diet keeps increasing, as long as we are not addressing those structural causes of hunger, we will not be able to get the numbers down. We will definitely not be able to reach the Sustainable Development Goal number 2 of ending hunger and food insecurity by 2030.
You mentioned a number of things that were, in fact, in this report that's been released by the United Nations. Let me just zero in on the issue of funding, because the report even said that one of the main challenges remains access to funding. So in your opinion, how do you scale up the funding response? What's needed?
Well, before talking about how do we scale it up, I think it's really important to talk about the gaps and how this financing is going to where it's needed. Last year, Action Against Hunger published a report called the Hunger Funding Gaps, where we saw that 53% of the appeal to finance humanitarian crises linked to hunger were not financed. And that actually, and the report highlights it, it's a country that needed the most. And Haiti, Afghanistan last year were the 2 biggest ones, that gets the lower percentage of their appeal being financed. And in this report as well, when we looked at the 13 countries the most in need, and we looked at the amount of money needed, we found that the need was about $4 billion. Now, you know what $4 billion account to? It's also a quarter of what American people spend on betting on the Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to how can we find ways of financing, there are certainly a number of innovative ways that we can find to mechanisms to be able to allow financing, because the money is there, the resources is there.
When you say innovative ways, like what? Can you just give me an example?
It could be taxing. It could be using the public with what interests them more, and can they pay a percentage. It could be insurance as well, especially on the smallholder farmers. So there are a certain number of ways that are listed and explained in the report, much better than I do, because right. I'm not a finance specialist.
Okay. Okay, let me ask you this then.
That could help.
Let me just ask you this. I mean, the report says that the goal of zero hunger by 2030 seems unlikely. That is a pretty grim assessment. From the work that you do and from what you've seen, do you share that assessment?
Yes, absolutely. As long as this issue of financing, the issue of having access also to the people that need it the most, because we talk about financing being a big problem. Conflict. We have currently some large conflicts. We have, Gaza, Sudan are places where we are struggling to have access to the population. As long as those things are not solved, we are sharing as well the pessimistic view that we will not be reaching this goal.
Okay, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much for speaking to us from Spain.
Thank you very much for welcoming me.